Benjamin Wheeler, and I'm here with my co host, Anthony Marquetta. And I'm here with our guest, Carolyn Furlong, with her new publication, Theophany. How are you doing, Carolyn?
I'm doing fine, thanks. It's been a while.
It has. You've been a friend of the show for a long time. What was the last thing that you had us we had you on for?
I'm pretty sure that was Debris, and that was a year ago.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. Uh, People who are interested in supporting Carolyn can find the link in the comments across all versions of the live stream. Uh, Let me see here. This book uh, has a giant mech on it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Theophany?
Okay, Theophany started as a short story. There was a publication call put out for Story with a Giant Robot, and I love giant robots, usually of the more animal kingdom kind than the anthropomorphic kind. But I looked at the homework for the anthology and I thought, I can do that. So it came out shorter than I wanted it to because the more I was looking at, the more I was writing it, and the more I had to tighten it. And it was like, well, yeah, but I really want to get in there's a word limit. And I have to hit the word limit. So I did, and I sent it in, but it didn't make the cut, which was fine because I have the opportunity to expand on everything. I can actually get inside the robot's head and show his perspective. So that, so from there, there's still a lot of the short story, the original short story in the novella, but I got to expand it because I got to include the robot's perspective and then build on the two human characters' perspective. Because the story takes place on a planetoid, well, in a planetoid, because the atmosphere, such as it is on the outside, is too thin for human habitation. So they built underground. And the planetoid is named Niban, and the people who built Niban were very interested in, invested in keeping their independence until and played a little fast and loose, sorry, with the voting rules and managed to get themselves into power. This didn't sit well with
Classic.
anybody, but nobody was able to do
Hmm.
anything until it was too late.
All right.
So I'm reading through the summary of the book on Amazon right now, and
Hmm.
obviously you just gave yours, but like that's not what I want to. Like the plot summary, I understand, but what's interesting to me, and I also noticed this in the one written review that's currently out on Amazon, is the story is referred to as a story of healing, hope, and wonder, and the top comment calls it cozy science fiction and says it's a look behind the scenes of a revolution focusing on survival and healing. So the thing that I'm wondering as I hear this is what exactly, I'm trying to think of how to word the question. Like, does this take place after a successful revolution, in the middle of the revolution? And if it's in the middle of the revolution, like, is this just, they've been at it for a long time and they're getting jaded? Like, I'm curious about how this theme interacts with the story, I guess, is how I would put it.
Yeah, it's in the middle of a revolution. The two main characters, Bass and his wife Ami, are they're on the sidelines. They're not actual revolutionaries. They're not involved. They pass messages every now and then. They support the revolution, but they're too busy surviving to actually take part. They can't, as they say, afford it. But then Rebel Cells is discovered in their block because, of course, it's underground. You have the city's locks. So Savians know that there's a rebel cell. They not only kill the rebel cell, they take revenge on everybody in that particular block. And they specifically focus on the women. So what Bass does is he does something insane. Nobody has been allowed outside the city in 10 years. The Niban is not an empty planetoid. There are all kinds of creatures inside, underground, that can be very dangerous to human habitation. What the Nibanians would do is they would go out and they would hunt these creatures, keep them down, remind them, this is our territory, don't come here or you're going to die. The Savians disarmed the hunt anymore. So going out into the caverns, as opposed to the mining to living for years, is something like suicide. But if you have to choose between the caverns and the Savians, well, the caverns are at least a clean way to go. So that's very much where it starts, and I'm glad you brought up that fact. This story is very much not as action-oriented as some of my other stories have been, because the last year was very, very stressful. So writing action was a bit hard, and the more I worked on the story, the more I thought, I don't necessarily want it to be high-octane action and high-flying adventure and all the rest. What about the people on the sidelines in a revolution? On the sidelines of the big battles, the big epic fights? What's their story? Fit into everything. So the story really focuses, because the titular Theophany is the robot on the cover. That's his designation. THE-0PY, Theophany. And a theophany is I'm trying to remember the exact definition. It's essentially a gift from God, something you didn't expect, but that helps you grow closer to him. So the Theophany's name comes from that. It's something that unexpected that helps you bring you closer to the Almighty. And in this respect, you've got two very desperate people who are willing to die, possibly a horrific death, nasty predators outside the cities underground on Niban, but they're still ready and willing to face the Savians. This is a last-ditch Hail Mary pass, hope and a prayer. We're doing this on the base hope that Bass's father, who encountered a giant guardian out in the caverns, that the guardian is still there and that it can help us escape.
Okay, so the Theophany robot is going to try and help them survive in this area, is like the idea behind it, and they do not expect to see him, but he is like almost a miracle that he has arrived and given them this chance that they otherwise would not have. Am I understanding like the idea behind it correctly?
Yeah, that's pretty much the idea. They find a little more than they bargained for, because the specific programming for the Theophanies is that they are, you remember the medical dogs in World War I?
Yeah.
That's what a Theophany is. They are trained, but instead of it being an actual dog, they are programmed to go out, find anybody on the battlefield wounded, pick them up, make sure they're patched up enough that they'll survive transport to someplace safe to get healed up. And the thing is, Theophanies are outmoded by this particular time. They've been replaced by the Mons model. That's it. Which are angelic type robots. So this Theophany anyways, because his kind no longer is no longer made. But his is the type of keeps on ticking. There have been theophanies found centuries after they were thought lost or destroyed or dead, still working their routes, still protecting people. So it's not unheard of for a theophany to still exist, but it's still a long shot as far as Bass and me are aware of when they start running.
Okay, I see. So this is an interesting question then, something worth discussing in this current climate, I guess, which is you have this robot, as one of our top comments aptly puts it, or our first comment aptly puts it, angel robots with question marks and exclamation points. We are now in a world where we have created something that could pass the Turing test, frankly, quite easily, right? It's no longer really a question. Now, the Turing test was always stupid. Uh, I'm hot take there. I know. I've always believed this. As John C. Wright, I think, put it. I'm trying to remember the exact wording that he used, but the idea that consciousness is determined by like whether or not someone can mistake you for being conscious makes absolutely no sense. It's just simply a non-argument. So I don't consider the fact that modern learning language models can pass the Turing test to be particularly significant. With that said, it is absolutely true that when you interact with a learning language model in the modern day, they've progressed faster than I think a lot of people who I've talked to would have realized. Like, I'm not surprised by this. The reason that I'm not surprised by this is as soon as I kind of saw that, oh, wow, they're actually really able to mimic human speech, I figured that, it was just a matter of time. They just kind of had to catch up with being able to reflect what a modern computer can do, which is incredible, right? A modern computer can process information so much faster than human beings. So now we have these learning language models that are basically able to replicate human conversation and can even replicate human writing with a lot. Like they're really good at it. Um, and you can have discussions with them. They appear to have personalities. You can shape their personalities in the way that you discuss with them, right?
Mhm.
So I say this to say I don't consider learning language models to be alive. I am a Thomist in that sense, very much so, in this sense at least. So I think that the idea of a machine being able to be built to be alive is it's a misnomer. It's just a kind of a misjudgment of categories. All computers are essentially rock banging machines, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Essentially what you're doing is counting the number of rock bangs and then saying 0 rocks, this is what you do. 1 rock, this is what you do. And the history of computing has just been a way to bang those rocks faster and faster and faster so
Mhm.
that the computer can do exactly what you say. A language learning model, I consider it to be simply an evolution of that, just programmed in such a way that it can mimic human thought patterns and speech. But I don't consider it alive. This is a long way of me asking, A, do you consider your robots to be alive in any meaningful way? And B, what do you think of language learning models? Is that where we're going with this? Because I think this is connected to your story, even if that's not the main theme of it.
To answer the first question, I think it depends on exactly you want in the story, because big fan of Transformers here, living robots, I can deal. Now,
Oh, I'm
whether or
happy
not
with
they
it in
can be
fiction. It's fun in
no,
fiction.
no, yeah, but whether they can be built to be alive, no, I don't believe that. The question, the way Theo, that's how they address him in the show, in the story. The way Theo works is he's been alive, activated so long, and he has, even though he's had many many years of being alone himself, he's developed a sort of personality all on his own. And it's more his interactions with humans, his interactions with God, actually, because he he reflects on the fact that no one knows if a robot has a soul or if he has a soul. It doesn't really matter to him because his job is that's what he's going to stick to. I don't think he was originally built with a soul. I don't think any machine can be. Now, if somehow the Almighty allows them to develop one, well, that's up to him and the machine, which is where Theo kind of fits in my idea of how robots might turn out someday, maybe on the far reaches of the galaxy. Who knows? As for language learning models, I think the ones I've heard most about are large language learning models. It's just a program that you feed data in it, and it might be very, very good at what it can toss out in response, but it's not going to be its own personality. It's not going to be a human. Maybe again on the far reaches of the galaxy, you might have one maybe that gets close. But again, the inspiration for Theo was the dogs in World War I, the medical dogs that would come in and help out the soldiers, or just lie down with them while they were dying. So could a computer conceivably, even a large language model, rise to somewhere below the level of a dog? Maybe. Don't know. Above my pay grade, as they say.
Yes, I understand the argument. I guess part of the reason this so interests me is because, in my opinion, I think that actually people are trying to think of how to put it. I almost think that they are too skeptical of what they're able to do, or maybe too optimistic. Like, yeah, but large XKCD had a comic about this a few years ago that was like, computers will never be able to blank, and then there's a thing that computers are now able to do. One of them, like write a sonnet, would have been a big one for decades, right? Computer will never be able to write a sonnet. Well, I hate to say this, but I am a writer, but I am not a poet. I haven't practiced poetry. I would need to write poetry for months before I became confident enough in my poetry to think it was worth publication. A computer and a large language model, and you're right, I called it by the wrong acronym. Large language model, not language learning. But anyway, a large language model can write a better sonnet than me, straight up. It can't write a better short story than me, although I can certainly use it to write a short story. But it can write better poetry than I can right now, and probably most people. Reminds me of the line in the old Will Smith iRobot, which I've always had the opinion that it was actually a pretty decent movie, where he says, "Can a computer, can a robot write a symphony?" And he goes through all that, and then the robot looks at him and goes, "Can you?" And he kind of stares him down because he doesn't really have a response. Like, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of the traditional markers that we have are going to fall. And I sometimes see what I consider to be like a naivete that was then borne out. Like, there was a college professor who wrote probably about a year ago was when I read this article, saying he wasn't worried about ChatGPT and writing essays because he could always tell when somebody used ChatGPT. Well, I have news for you. In the modern day, most college professors cannot tell if you're not an idiot about it, right? Now, granted, if you're willing to cheat, you're already trying to be lazy. However, if you aren't lazy and you take out the obvious AI isms, you might call it, right? And you double check your sources, you're going to have AI can fool a college professor. Like, I am 100% sure of this. And if a college professor doesn't think so, then what that tells me is they've probably been fooled and don't know it, right? Like,
Okay, so all right. Thank you, Anthony. Is this the discussion inside the book or no?
No, it's not in the book, but I will say that what I've heard about AI, because I don't use ChatGPT, I don't want to use it as a crutch.
right.
I like being able to write my own stuff, even my own blurbs and posts, and using ChatGPT, it's like, I don't want the skill I have with this to atrophy, and relying on ChatGPT or another writing program strikes me as letting that out. I have no issue with someone who wants to use it and then edit it and work on it that way if they really want to do it. but I don't want to use that. But I don't think one of the big things that I've heard that ChatGPT and others can't do is they cannot, what's the word? They can't do an emotional through line like an actual human writer can. Now, maybe someday they'll be good enough to fake it. I don't know. That's that's above my pay grade too. But right now they cannot match the emotional through line that an author gives to a story. And the other thing too is if you feed them too much on something, you'll get more of that thing back.
Mhm.
So if you feed them on the latest lines, for instance, you're going to get all of that regurgitated back to you. Now you could edit it into something readable, but if you just take it straight from the AI's mouth, as it were, you're not going to get a very good product. You're going to get something that's very visibly and obviously not that's very obviously mechanical. Now, it might be mistaken as humanly mechanical because there are a lot of people who do that even without machines. They will write a story straight from the pattern, the most used or obvious pattern that they know, the one they've seen repeated enough. So they just write straight off, and it doesn't fly. So an AI can do that kind of thing right now. What happens in the story with Theo is he's well and truly beyond that point because, and there's a spoiler, so I won't say exactly why he's above this point. He's past this point, the large language models point, and it's not because he was designed to be past this point. He grew that way himself. And that's the most interesting thing to me about mecha stories and living robot stories. It's not, oh, what have we unleashed? Our scientists were so busy thinking about what they could do, they didn't think about if they should. What's interesting to me is, okay, you essentially made a robot dog. Well, what if it starts acting like a dog? What if it starts from that point growing and becoming human-like? Kind of like one of my favorite robot stories was Short Circuit. I don't know if either of you saw that.
Which story? I'm sorry.
It's a story from the mid 1980s. It's about this war robot. He's one of 5 that they're testing. There's a storm going on, so they say, okay, we got to pull the robots in so that they don't get struck by lightning and destroyed. Well, one of them gets struck by lightning, and that's number 5. And number 5 starts wandering around, and he starts learning. His catchphrase when he meets she's a bit of a hippie. She's very into animal rescues, and she considers the military warmongers, all that kind of stuff. And he starts learning from her. He visits her. She assumes she's met an alien, so she starts treating him nicely. She shows him a bunch of books, and he starts scanning through them. And he says, "Need more input." And then she finally figures out, no, he's not an alien. He's a robot from the military. And she tells him, I got one of your machines. You need to come pick it up. Well, number 5 has the intellect at this point of it. So he starts hopping after the grasshopper, and he accidentally squishes it. And she says, "Oh, look what you did! You killed it! You're a killing machine." And he says, "No problem, Stephanie. Stephanie, reassemble," because he thinks he's a 2-year-old. He thinks that all it takes is to put the grasshopper back together. And she says, "I can't do that. It's dead. You squished it. This is permanently disassembled." Disassemble being dead? Because she's already told him that you're going to be taken back home and you're going to be disassembled. Well, and he says, no, disassemble. Number 5 is alive. And the whole movie is him trying to prove he's alive. Theo
I
is
swear I should know
centuries.
this, but there's something about this is ringing a bell. I'm Googling to double check.
Yeah, and Theo doesn't get struck by lightning. There's no lightning
Short.
inside
Yeah.
underground.
Okay.
Yeah,
I did see it years ago. You were decent movie, by the way.
yeah. It's a fun movie. Very fun. Would never be made today.
Yeah,
Well,
like
if they
I
do, they make it
recognized it vaguely,
trippy
and then I had
and
to look it up and be like, "Oh, that robot, the janky looking thing." Yep.
Yeah, he's kind of pre-Wall-E.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
then
come
and
to
so
think of it, it is very Wally, huh? Like,
yeah, and so the thing about oh, where the thing about Theo is even though he didn't get struck by lightning, he's had years to go from large language model to dog to person, a sort of evolution, if you will. But there's a helping hand in there, and I'm not going to give a spoiler for that. That's the ending. I don't want to spoil that. The time Bass and me meet him, he's not strictly a machine. Not anymore. He's very much got a personality. And I was actually kind of surprised that the review said he was like Baymax because all I could think was everybody's going to think of Bumblebee because he has no voice box. It was damaged centuries ago and he hasn't been able to replace it. So he doesn't talk. He uses sign language to convey his meaning because being in Niban's underground atmosphere is poisonous to humans. You need a breathing mask if you're going to go out in the caverns or work in the mines. And because the Savians took over, they stopped using proper filters for the cities underground because they don't care. It's not their people, it's just a bunch of slaves anyway. Maybe at the very top tier, you have proper filtration, and everybody below that, the filters can fail at any time. And then you just suffocate and die. So Theo, so Nibanians have developed a sign language for when they're out in the caverns or in the mines so that they can sign to each other. It's not American ASL. It's a sign language that's specific to Niban so that they can communicate with each other in the tunnels, in the mines and in the caverns. So Theo doesn't need a voice. He can just sign. And he doesn't need a radio, even though he has one. But that's how he communicates. And I thought, oh gosh, that's Bumblebee. Instead, someone said he's like Baymax, but a knight errant.
that's pretty cool.
yeah, I do like that description. Baymax as a knight errant. Baymax is, now that you say it too, Baymax is a good at least in the movie version of Big Hero 6, because I have heard that the comic version is different, which I am sure you know since you're a big fan of the Marvel comics. But
Yeah.
the movie version of Baymax does kind of remind me of what you're describing here, but Baymax as a knight errant is a fun idea.
Yeah, he was a lot. The robot was a lot of fun to write because I had only in the original short story I only had Bass's perspective, because it focused on him and me because word limit. I couldn't breach that word limit, even though it was like I really want to look at be in Theo's head for a bit, and I had a lot of fun writing from his perspective and getting to show some of the scenes that had been in my mind when I was writing. I did have to work a little harder at that because once you have him save them, you have to go and explain the rest of it. Well, he can't just save them and take them home like puppies he's found. There has to be more human contact here, or the story doesn't work so well. I'd already had some of the human contact in the original short story, but then I had to expand it to make it make more sense. So that was it was a lot of fun to write. It was and also kind of therapeutic because last year was so tense. I really wasn't having a good time writing anything actiony. So I did the story on an action note, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, that's just not going to work for this particular story. because we have action all over the place. And what I managed to do this very well is I wanted to have a story that they call it cozies, and the Japanese, I might mangle the pronunciation. The Japanese name for the genre is isekai, which is known as the healing or comfort genre. Nothing much happens, but in the best way, as the description goes. I just finished watching an anime series that was very isekai called The Elegant Yokai Apartment Life. Very good series. It only lasted one season. Darn it! But it's an everyday kind of series. These ones, if you want an English, an American equivalent, that's not a comedy, you might try something like Little Bear or Kipper. That's British. Little Bear's American. But it's where nothing much happens and the adventures are kind of mundane, quote unquote. But I managed to. I was told I managed to navigate that and actually make it satisfying, even though it's not action oriented. It's very actiony in the beginning. You have them running straight from the Savians at the beginning. They have to run. They so there's a lot of rushing around in the first one, but it's a little slower, but you get more background. You get more in Theo's mind and in Bass's and everybody else's, and it was really fun to write.
It sounds like it. It sounds like you put a lot of thought into the world and the things surrounding it. So it doesn't seem like it's very long, right? How many words is it roughly?
Um, Somewhere around or north of 25,000.
Okay.
It's a
Okay,
very
so
yeah
a solid novella.
yeah.
All right. Very nice. Yeah, I appreciate a lot of the world building from. You want to know what I see a lot of the DNA of here, and I'm not sure if this was intentional by you or if I'm just hallucinating things since I haven't read the book yet. But I can see a lot of the bones of 86 in here, which know that you are a very big fan of. Am I correct in noticing this, or would that be unintentional?
I'm very fascinated that you noticed this because I did not. I did not even think of 86 while I was doing this, but that's a fascinating connection to me. The underground predators in Niban Fumo. Again, I might be mangling the pronunciation. It's a Japanese yokai, which is it's alternately known as an underground or earth spider. So, and of course, the mechs in 86 are spider-like. Doesn't matter if you're talking about the Legion or the Juggernauts. They might have 6 legs instead of 8, but they're spider-like all the same. So I had not thought of that directly, but there is that aspect to it. And the more I think about it, the Savians probably do kind of are reminiscent of the Republic of San Magnolia, even though that's not their inspiration at all. The name is a big giveaway. I think you can figure out if you spell it, but that's the Savians are based on. But that's interesting to me because I had not thought about them, and I think you might be right. I think I might have pulled some from my memory on that. And
Well, part of it to me, like again, I haven't read it, so it could end up that I'm just like making connections that aren't there because I know you like 86. So keeping that in mind, part of it to me that made me go, oh, like I could see some of the DNA of 86 here. Is that 86 as a series? What's so unusual about it, and what I like so much about it, by the way, is that it is very much a series that is. I'm trying to. It's hard for me to put into words exactly what I mean because, on one hand, it's a very typical mech series, right? Like you have this group of kids who are in a thing and they need to fight a war and they're in mechs, right? But on the other hand, I think what distinguishes 86 is that in other stories, which are like about trauma or about people undergoing these horrible things and that might end, with a heroic sacrifice. 86 kind of distinguishes itself that, yes, they are still in the middle of the war. Yes, they are, in a sense, still going through this, right? In a very real sense, still going through this. But it is also a
Mm-hmm.
show about overcoming trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much like, I would argue, the thing that distinguishes 86, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
more than any other mech show, like, the main character, whose name I forget because it's been a while since I've watched or read it. But the
Shin.
main character of 86, not the girl, the guy, the main guy.
Shin. Yeah.
Yeah, Shin, thank you. Shin is a character, like, as an author, I could tell you with almost 100% certainty, due to the type of story that 86 is, Shin is absolutely not going to die.
Mm.
Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I could, of course, end up being totally wrong, but even if I am wrong, I would argue that that would be like a change in direction from the sort of story that 86 is. Even
Mm-hmm.
though it is an extremely action-oriented series, even though it is very, like, they're in extremely dangerous situations, but Shin
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to die. And the reason Shin isn't going to die isn't because the author is afraid to kill him. Like, I would criticize, for example, Horikoshi of Hero Aka of this sometimes, even though I absolutely love My Hero Academia.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorites. I do think that there's a little bit of that he really doesn't like killing characters and gets a little too attached to them sometimes. That's not what's going on here. Shin can't die because that would miss the entire point of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Shin can't die because the entire story is about how Shin moves forward from the unbelievable amounts of trauma that he has been forced to survive
Mm-hmm.
and the incredible PTSD he's suffering. So, in that sense, even though it is an active war story, it also, like, there are themes in common with yours, is how I would put it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's very much a story about healing.
Yeah, and that is actually, now that you mention it, that was probably an unconscious influence, because that was the exact reason I wrote the story. It was it was essentially therapy after a point, because of the absolute tension of the last few years. It was like, okay, I'm dealing with this. I'm putting this in a story and I'm dealing with it. And that's pretty much where Bass is coming from, in that he's been through a nasty thing. He saw his parents killed. He saw his wife had to run, was killed. And they both ended up working in the mines. The mines, the tunnels, as they're called in Niben, are essentially a death sentence. There's very little in the way of light, and what they have you mining, Niben used to specialize, before the Savians took over, in bauxite. Now, bauxite is poisonous here on Earth when it's inhaled. You can be poisoned in other ways from it, but the main way is if you inhale it. So Niban is a perfect place to mine bauxite because you're wearing a respirator all the time. You're not going to breathe it in. And the Nibanians had suits that would keep it out of your skin. Perfectly legitimate business. Then the Savians take over and they have them start mining something else, something that their suits, and because they stopped production of these suits, these much better suits, they start using cheap suits. These would be bad enough if you were still mining bauxite. Instead, you're mining the other, which is poisonous once it makes skin contact. And both Emmy and Bass notes it mostly on his wife because she calls it war paint. She's got it on her face. And as he tells her later, once it makes it to your face, you've got very little time left. So aside from the poisoning, the absolute hopelessness of being stuck in the mines forever in the dark, Bass would find fellow miners with their masks off. You take your mask off, you've got seconds. And he always used to wonder, well, one of these days, is it going to be me with my... He stopped wondering that when he met and married his wife. but he still got boatloads of that trauma in the story. That trauma, the trauma of losing his father and then his mother, and the in general trauma of being held captive essentially for 10 whole years. He was 14, I think, if I remember the story right, when the Savians took over. I'd have to go back and look, but he was very young when they took over. So he has spent a lot of his formative years trying not to bend, trying not to break under all of this. And that's so that it's quite possible 86 was an unconscious influence, and I think you might be right with that, Anthony.
Yeah, it's I don't know, something about it made me think of 86. I think just the themes of handling and dealing with trauma in the way that it does, even though 86 obviously does it in a completely different way. In a way that also works, but is just not the same thing. So yeah, as I'm things that I do understand what you're saying too about writing stories as sort of a form of self therapy, I guess. Um I I don't do this consciously, right? And I don't
Mm,
think I could do it consciously. Like I wouldn't be capable of doing it consciously, of going through a decision and writing a story about it. I think I would feel too forced to me.
mhm,
However, I have noticed something over time, and this is relatively recently I noticed this. I was discussing it with Ben, in fact. There are themes that I continue coming back to in stories, and the themes that I continue coming back to tend to be the things that most bother me about the world. And specifically, the theme that I keep coming back to is essentially like meditations on suffering, is what I would call it, like the problem of evil. You know, um,
mhm,
but in various ways, I'm always trying to figure out, like, what is the point of all this? I mentioned this long ago, like that. I wrote an article like why I joined the Superversives several years ago at this point, right? And the reason I wrote it is that I had a reputation in my own family of being very cynical and very much a curmudgeon. And my sister finally goes to me, "Why are you in the Superversives anyway?" Because I was complaining about something. Who knows what it was, right? Probably something political, because tend to just be very negative on politics, right? And I said, "That's a great question." And the reason is that I I am not really a cynic, even though I call myself a cynic and act like a cynic. What I really am secretly is a romantic. Uh, right? Like,
mhm,
what I want to be true and what I do believe to be true is the romantic view of the world. Same as like J.R.R. Tolkien. If you talk to J.R.R. Tolkien, he had a reputation for being incredibly pessimistic. Somebody point out, go, "Oh, come on." They go, "The Lord of the Rings, like everything works out at the end," which it does. And I've seen people go, "Oh no, the ending's very bittersweet." While there is a bittersweet edge to it, I would argue that the ending of The Lord of the Rings is primarily happy with a bittersweet edge.
mhm,
But yeah, like J.R.R. Tolkien had this reputation for being a big pessimist, right? And in his story, uh, he would talk about, if you talk to him, they would go, "Yeah, he's a huge, very pessimistic." And then someone goes, "Why is the Lord of the Rings notable?" Then they said it's notable as being like one of the only stories in his entire legendarium with a happy ending. Like, they said people who read The Lord of the Rings and go, "Oh, like Tolkien's not like that." They go, "Yeah, like that's because he picked the one story that didn't end in incredible with everything worse off for everyone." Like almost all of them end up that way in Tolkien's legendarium. And that's kind of how I view the world. But like Tolkien, I think, not that I am like Tolkien as a writer, I wish, as we all do, but
mm,
uh, like Tolkien, I have this sort of sense that like something is wrong, right? It's not supposed to be this way. You know, something is off. Where the world isn't the way it's supposed to be. We're not like people aren't supposed to be like this. Things aren't supposed to be like this. Surely there must be something going. Like there must be a reason, right? Like,
mhm,
is there a reason? What is the reason? And a lot of my writing is kind of me exploring this tension of sacrifice, of like, trauma and death and sacrifice and all of these things, right? And
Mhm.
resolving that tension and figuring out a way to do it. So I totally understand that, like, I'm writing a series of stories about knights after the fall of Camelot, and then it occurred to me, like, why am I writing about them in this context? I love the Arthurian legends, but this has always been the part of the story that appealed to me. And sure, it appeals to everyone, right? Like, but I'm writing about after the fall. I'm not even writing about the fall of Camelot. I am writing about the people who have been left behind after the fall of Camelot, the survivors, right?
Mhm.
And what they're going to, and how they make sense of the fact that Camelot just failed. It failed. It didn't work, right? Like, that everything that Arthur worked for has now been destroyed. What do you do with that? And this is the thing that interests me, because that's kind of how I think about life, right? Like, it's how I think about the world, that we live in a fallen world where things are simply going to fail. And it's not going to work the way we want. And how do you deal with that? How do you do that? How does Job deal with it? So this is just a long-winded way of me saying that I get what you're saying about you're working through issues in your writing, and sometimes you start it and you don't realize that's what you're doing
Mhm.
until you realize that when you're writing this, it's forcing you to think deeply about these things in
Mhm.
order to make the story work.
Yeah. And that was something I definitely found the further I went, because I had to think about wider picture. It was always going to be a novella. I wasn't going to make it too long, but it was always it was okay. Now I've got to think about this next step. Where else? What's the next part? How is the resistance around where it? Because it was always going to stay on Bass, Ami, the other characters, and Theo. And the thing is, it's in the prologue introduction to American Mage and Other Stories, my second collection. I've always been fascinated with the stories about the guys who came back from war, and or who were tortured and managed to make the best of it is the wrong term precisely, but who managed to heal. Because so very often Hollywood would leave that out. Hollywood and other writers. This is one of the reasons 86 appeals to me, is she has them actually dealing with the trauma. Most stories in the West, they don't even look at it unless, they're wallowing in it. That's annoying. The wallowing is annoying because it's not healthy. And it annoys real world veterans, it annoys real people who've been there, done that, and it annoys audiences after a point who know these people or who talk to them even for a few minutes and go, really? One of the illustrative stories on this is, I know someone who knew a Vietnam veteran who spent time in the Hanoi Hilton. Or if not the Hanoi Hilton, he was tortured by the North Vietnamese. Specifically, actually, by one of their employed Cuban torturers. And this guy dozed off in a diner somewhere. He just dozed off. He was tired. He was a manual laborer. And he wakes up. The waitress, it's late at night, and it's closing time. He wakes up to the waitress poking him with a broom handle. Why are you doing that? And she says, well, you're one of those Vietnam veterans. I didn't know if you'd just go off. That's not how trauma works. That's not how people work. That's not even how a majority of traumatized veterans are. And this guy had been through the wars. The Cuban torturer took his teeth. He once took his shirt off during a job, and a little girl asked him, where'd you get all those scars on your back? And he said, I had a fight with a tiger. This is what real veterans, real people are like, and yet because of the way Hollywood and the media portrayed Vietnam veterans specifically, this guy wakes up to a waitress prodding him with, she's afraid he's going to go off. So And then this is kind of where Bass' fear before he met and married his wife of ending up like the guys who took the mask off in the mines comes from. Because once he has her, he has something to live for. Before that, he's barely existing, barely surviving. But once he has her, he has something to fight for and something he will fight for. Even if it's hopeless, because as far as he and Ami know at first, they have no guarantee Theo's out there. They have no guarantee that they're not going to die at the claws or fangs of any of the predators that they're pretty sure are out there. It's been 10 years. No one's been hunting. As soon as we get past a certain point, we're probably predator chow. But hey, it's at least better than where we were. And the thing about 86, and one of the reasons I keep coming back to trauma, because it is a theme in my story, is what this is where I love Asato's work, is she actually has them confronting it, and she has them confronting it and working through it in a very believable and human way. Because, and this is where I can see where other people who haven't investigated the rest of Tolkien's legendarium take a lot of hope from the Lord of the Rings, is the Lord of the Rings leaves you in a position where it's not perfect, but where you can at least get to a healthy level. Because I can understand where Tolkien ultimately had his pessimism, but the thing is, and this is why an online friend and fellow writer likes to talk about a lot, is it's not realistic and it's not healthy story writers to just leave someone in that broken state. You don't leave a broken bone broken. You splint it. You make sure that it heals. Will it ever be the same as it was before it was broken? Well, no, depending on how bad the break. What was his? It was Saint Ignatius of Loyola. He had them, because it healed wrong the first time. He had them break it again, and it was never the same after that. He was always hobbling. It was shorter than his other leg, so he was always off kilter. And so the idea isn't what Hollywood has forgotten, because a fairy tale ending of, ooh, happily ever after. Happily ever after isn't necessarily for this life, and happily is never perfect. But if it's good enough to be healthy, if it's good enough to get you up the next morning and tackle your problems, or even if they're mundane problems like, oh, I need to run to the store and get more milk, it's still a win. You're still here, you're still ticking, life's still worth living. And that's why I keep coming back to it in various stories. And most of the frustration with last year came out in that I can't write action. So no, I wasn't in Bass's headspace, and I didn't have his particular worries. But if you were certain worries up, it made writing for Bass, since we know that for the last 4 years suicides picked up, and not being in that headspace doesn't mean you don't care about the people who are. And Bass was worried about getting in that headspace, but he managed not to get there. And that was one of the themes I really like tackling in the story, is you've been through the wars, now it's time to patch yourself up, patch other people up, and then they can help you patch yourself up too. The brokenness is not the point. The point is you can heal, you can get better, one day at a time.
It's true. Uh, yeah, there's always a kind of a fetishism that comes in with a lot of the work that's being done today by Hollywood, by mainstream writers, trad pub writers. You know, it's sort of a fetishization of trauma. They had a healthy society that was spiritually sick. So what happens when you have that mix is that eventually the children start going crazy because they have to have something wrong with them because they can't experience the difficulties it takes to create a good society. So it's a strange mix. It's a very strange mix. And so having actual, realistic views of it without fetishizing it is important. You know, Part of the things that I've been careful with. Yep.
No, yeah, not fetishizing it is important, and that's probably why I keep coming back to it, is because I'm really tired of people who fetishize it, who say, no,
Mm.
this is, I call it wallowing, but fetishizing works too, who just say, this is all there is. Get off my lawn.
Yep. There's what am I trying to say? Like with Jack Morrow, I've been very careful to guide him along a path that keeps him, at a strong position, but also like he's working it through. And there's also an element of the sociosexual hierarchy that, sort of how one deals with trauma. The delta might work through it. The alpha might make it so that no one can hurt him ever again, sort of thing. The bravo might become stiff. The gamma might become more neurotic. Uh, the omega might become, more reticent and more capable of extreme violence, bursting forth like a dam. These things, you can, work through them, but it's to, uh, you know, if you don't know where you're standing, you'll be blown anywhere with this stuff. It's better to lie to a child and say that you had to fight a tiger than it is to say that some Cuban ripped your back apart for 3 weeks at the Hanoi Hotel or
Mm-hmm.
however it would be.
Yeah.
Partially because the kid doesn't need to understand that level of depravity at this point in time. Like people want to, oh, you
Mm-hmm.
shelter kids, but it's like I watched a movie, like Rats of Nim. I saw a scene where like they're having this like desperate sword fight, where every scratch counts. It's like I don't know. I think that whole children being protected thing was all kinds of bunk. Uh, you know, Disneyification. Like, so do you?
I would say
What's
there's
a?
there's a level of protection that children should have, and then beyond that, it's stifling. It's
Mm,
it's not bad to say I lost a fight with a tiger, because what are you gonna tell the child? But it's
right.
bad in a story if let's see, how was it? I was watching a clip from Jen Fulwiler's. She's a Catholic comedian, converted from atheism. She had a skit recently. She put up a small bit of it, and she said most children's shows these days are all about a group of friends getting together and they fix the mess. Well, that that's not realistic. One of the most annoying things about me, because I came in on the early stages of Dora the Explorer. One of the most annoying things to me about that series, we never got any background on Swiper, the fox, whose whole shtick is that he steals from the heroine, and the way to stop him is say, "Swiper, no swiping! Swiper, no swiping! Swiper, no swiping!" And then he says, "Oh man," snaps his finger and walks away in dejection. And it's like, that's not a villain. That's not, you can't, if some mugger comes up to you, you can't hold your hand out and say, mugger, no mugging. No, that's not going to work. He's going to mug you. He's
Right.
going to beat you up. So it's one thing for a show, so an old episode of the Andy Griffith Show, where Andy Griffith he's visiting a poor couple, talking to her on her level, and he's talking because she's dipping cookies in milk, and he talks to her on her level, and I think in the same episode, oh no, it was a different episode. He told Opie the story of Romeo and Juliet, and he did it in a very. Most people would notice the Southern dialect he uses to tell the story, and the way he simplifies it. But even though he simplified it, he kept the point in. The point is, Romeo and Juliet were not at their best when they made these decisions, and no, you don't want to imitate them. And that's the part that's missing. That's the part that's been taken out when you no swiping. You're taking out that no, he's trying to steal from you, and you can't just because try doing that on the schoolyard with the local bear hair. He's going to take whatever it is from you. This is setting people up to get hurt, and that's not what's saying. I lost a fight with a tiger. When you say that, you're protecting the child's innocence from what hurt you. Like those pictures you have of the moms and the dads, and they've got the shield up, and the arrows hit them and the shield, and the little child doesn't notice because they're playing with something. That's what when you say I lost a fight with a tiger, that's what you're protecting them from. You're making sure that the people who hurt you cannot hurt that child by extension through you.
Yes.
Is not done with the modern Disney. Disneyfication. I normally ignore it, and I was fully intending to ignore it, but I heard so many things about the new Lilo and Stitch remake. I went and I looked it up.
Oh my goodness!
And
yeah,
one of the big things that I remember when I saw the movie first with Lilo and Nani and the entire Child Protective Services bit, that was a few years after the Cuban boy who was taken from his family in Florida and sent back to Cuba.
Yes.
Because
alien.
Yeah, it was just so when you have Ohana and Nani and Lilo working hard to stay together in the original movie, it calls family trumps everything, and then the new movie just destroys that. Based on what I've heard and what I've read, because not the portal teleporter that takes her back to Hawaii to spend time with Lilo. That's just you're still breaking the family. It's still Lilo is less important to her here than she is in the original movie. In the original movie, Nani is trying to be. Nani isn't even thinking about anything. She's sacrificing everything to stay with Lilo because Lilo needs her and she needs Lilo. They are, as the poet says, the other's world entire. They have no one else. And yes, they managed to expand it in a found family, a trope that has gone completely feral, as someone I know says, and been taken wildly out of context.
Yes.
But the thing is, they expand their family weekly and Cobra Bubbles and Stitch, but the core is still the sisters. And what the new movie does by sending Nani to college, it does. I know. I think you've both seen Saving Mr. Banks.
I cannot say I have.
In Saving Mr. Banks, Tom Hanks has a line because he's playing Disney. He's talking to P.L. Travers, the author of Mary Poppins. And this didn't happen in real life, but he says that's what storytellers do. They bring order to the world. And order to the world involves the family gets to stay together, Lilo and Nani Ohana. They get to stay together. The entire thing, the CPS is smoothed over, probably by Cobra Bubbles.
Yes.
And what Lilo and Stitch 2025 does is it puts disorder in the world. What Swiper No Swiping does is it puts disorder in the world. It sets Whereas if you go with Andy Griffith explaining in a very child-friendly way and a very direct way, Romeo and Juliet, that's protecting Opie, not by making him not read the play. At some point, he will read the play, but by giving him the Cliff Notes version, he sets up barriers to protect Opie in the future. By talking to the little girl in the other episode with when she's putting cookies in the milk, he's setting up ways for her to be protected because she now knows someone respects me. I can trust this man. He's treating me on my level with respect. And that's what modern storytelling has lost. That's the difference. Fight with a tiger, and I'm just going to bling in from Berkeley, California to Hawaii using this alien teleporter that, maybe Jumba can use it in the sequel to get back. This isn't necessarily the safest thing you could do. If you were given it by the Galactic High Councilwoman, that would be different, although it could still be hacked. But you're using Jumbas? Red flag. And that's the difference. Is modern storytelling takes out the barriers and the protective fields and says, "Oh, you can all just have a group hug, and that'll be fine." No, that's something elegant. Yokai Apartment Life actually touches on with one of the characters. She's because the protagonist is a high school student who's lost his parents. One of the teachers is, they say, "Oh, she's the Maid of Orleans. She's very, very focused. Save the world. She's a virtuous, upright woman." And the thing is, she's a very controlling woman. She doesn't initially come across that way, but once you see her in action, once you see how she treats the other children, how she treats the protagonist, and how she treats another teacher, it becomes very clear she's trying to control them with her kindness, killing them with kindness, essentially. And if you can't be controlled by her, she'll ignore you.
Yeah,
I've seen that sort of thing before.
There is a lot to say about the new Lilo and Stitch that we are not going to say. For my part, I will say that I was delighted to learn that they had botched it so badly. My big worry was that they were going to play it safe with Lilo and Stitch and just adapt it directly but boringly, and then it would be good and it would do really well and maybe save the Disney live action remakes, which I want to die. And then I learned that they might have wrecked this one worse than any of them, and I was thrilled. Because like people who are still getting upset at that this is going on, like, I get it to a point, but it's also like, no, you need to understand that, like, we are well beyond the point where we need to be taking this seriously as, any sort of real attempt at art, right? This is crass consumerism. However, if I had to say,
Propaganda.
yeah, propaganda, crass consumerism, propaganda. If I had to guess what was going on in this movie from what I've read and from people like who try to defend it and go, no, it does fit the themes in this convoluted way, I suspect the problem is that Disney, weirdly enough, for we're talking about like, oh, Hollywood doesn't like or doesn't understand happy endings. I think that's actually what's going on here in to an extent, like, because at the end of the original Lilo and Stitch, a choice needs to be made, a sacrifice needs to be made. Nani needs to choose Lilo over a more comfortable life for herself. Now, Nani is not the main character, nor is her character arc the focus of the movie, so there's never any real doubt that she wants to do this, right? But nevertheless, it is absolutely the thing that she has to do. The movie is, in a sense, like a tragedy, right? It's not a like, I don't mean that the movie is a tragedy in the classical sense. I'm not saying that it's a tragedy like, it's structured as a tragedy. What I'm saying is, something horrible has happened to them. Her parents are dead. And there's implication that in the movie that is subtle, but definitely there, that Lilo blames herself for the fact that her parents are dead. And Nani has no idea what to do or how to raise her, and is just looking for the best for Lilo. And ultimately, though, the conclusion they come to is that it is best for them to stay together. But it's only best because their parents are dead, right? The actual best thing would be if her parents were alive.
The thing about the big difference that struck me when I found out Nani went to college is you took away the fact that she's an adult. In the movie, the original movie, Nani is being an adult. She is throwing out everything she could pursue for herself to take care of her sister. She's the main thing she's looking for is not college, not anything to take her further and higher. It's whatever it takes to keep my sister with me.
Yeah, and
that's the adult thing
I felt
to do.
that her job as a hula dancer was incredibly realistic. Partially because I work as a bouncer, I do see women like Nani, not quite the same sort of family troubles or anything like that, but it's a real trope. It's a real thing. People act like this. Quite frankly, I've never known a woman to throw away her last remaining relative to pursue college.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it has happened, but those are the type of woman no man should pursue because she'll throw him away too.
At most, you would see women pursuing college to make sure they can stay with their family members. That to me would make Nani going to college make more sense if you were going to make a remake of the movie for some reason. Why mess with perfection? But to have her just college because that's what you do, no. Unless the only way it works to tie it in with the original themes is if she's got how she can keep Lilo.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she should be job hunting just like in the original. Now, job hunting sucks these days because of a lot of things, but that would just make the movie even better if you were to do it that way. And they didn't do it because it's propaganda at this point.
Did she get fired from her job in the movie? Did she get fired from her job in the middle of the movie?
Yeah, in the middle of the original.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't remember.
Yeah. What I was trying to say is I think Hollywood was trying to make it like you can have it all. So you mentioned like the nonsense of her using an alien teleporter, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the point is Nani can go to college and be a strong career woman and see Lilo whenever she wants to. Mm-hmm. And Lilo won't feel neglected by it, right? Mm-hmm. Like there is no sacrifice that needs to be made by her whatsoever. She can just get everything that she ever wanted. It doesn't require anything. It reminds me of people like the Hollywood remake. Do you know the movie The Wolf Children? I'm going to guess you do, but you might not.
I think we have the manga at the library, and I meant to watch the movie, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
I believe the movie came first and the manga was written afterward. Probably. The movie is a classic and you absolutely should watch it. Like it is an stellar film, one of the best anime movies outside of Miyazaki, right? Mm-hmm. Probably the masterpiece of Mamoru Hosoda, even though he had other movies that have won more awards. I think that most people I talk to consider that to be, either his best or a top 2 or 3 movie in his filmography, and he has a very highly regarded filmography. The movie is about a single mother, and it's a single mother who she marries a werewolf, and then she has 2 half wolf, half human children. And she needs to keep them hidden from the government and find a way to raise them. So she moves out to the countryside to basically allow them to be wolves in the countryside and not have to worry about people watching her, and has to basically teach herself how to farm. And that is what she dedicates her life to. It's like you could have the Hollywood version of Wolf Children, right? Where it's like, in reality, where the movie ends with her having essentially sacrificed everything that she has so that her children can choose whether they're going to be wolves or humans, right? And she's given them that gift. She's given them that choice. And she's done it with incredible sacrifice and selflessness. And the movie ends with her knowing that she has succeeded in in her goal, right? Her goal in life, her only goal in life was to make sure that her children had the ability to choose, right? And she did it. She accomplished her goal. Her children are able to choose, and she ends the movie just kind of content, right? She's living on her own in the countryside. Her daughter has gone off to boarding school. Her son is living in the mountains, and he's the new like lord of the woodland, right? And she's just content. Hollywood, beautiful, beautiful ending. Absolutely, absolutely heartbreaking, but also like uplifting. Yeah. Hollywood would never. They would never make this movie. Not in a million years would they have ever make this movie. At the very least, Disney would not make this movie. Because they would see the end of this movie and they would say, so wait, she doesn't get what she wants? Like, what about her dreams? Is she just going to sacrifice everything? Yeah. And the answer, of course, to that question is, of course she is. She's their mother. Like, that is exactly what she is going to do. And not only is she going to do it, she doesn't hesitate. There is no other consideration in her mind except that, of course, she is going to sacrifice everything for her children. Disney couldn't do it. They couldn't make that movie. The Disney version of Wolf Children would certainly end with her going off to the city and probably going to college, right? Honestly. Um and her children would be like, "No, no, mom, it's okay. We'll be good you've taught us. We'll be good on our own. You can visit us." Right? Which is absurd and misses the entire emotional thrust of the movie. And also misses the point of love. Love involves sacrifice, but it's sacrifice that we are willing and ready to make, right? That we're happy to make. We're happy to make it for the sake of those we love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's go ahead.
That's the part where the original movie, Nani is an adult. In the remake, she's not. An adult recognizes that there are sacrifices you have to make. There are things you have to do that you don't like, that stink on ice, but you've got to do it because you've got to get up at 9. You've got to be you got to get up at 6. You got to be at the job at 9 because you got to eat. You don't have to like the job. You don't have to like who you're working with. You got to do the job because otherwise you don't eat. And this is where modern stories are taking the barriers, the protective layers out of story. No, you don't have to make sacrifices. No, you never have to be an adult. And that's one of the hard lines that really hits out of Elegant Yokai Apartment Life. The protagonist's best friend from 3rd grade who's spending the night with him says, those were real adults. The hero's fellow apartment renters. All the people I know, because his best friend's rich, all the people I know, they were old. They weren't adults. And that's what this movie does wrong. Is it makes Nani old. She's physically an adult. On paper, she's an adult, but it makes her a child. Which the original Nani was that would pay the bills so she could keep Lilo and prove she could provide for her. She had no idea precisely how to be a mom because, as Lilo points out, I like you better as a sister than a mom. Well, yeah, because your job isn't to be her mom. Your job is to be her sister. You're her caretaker, but that doesn't mean you're her mom. And that was part of where Nani was falling down on the job, but she learned and she picked up after herself and she took care of Lilo. She was an adult. She made the sacrifices that needed to be made for her sister. And that's one of the things that I think I was aiming for with Theophany and a lot of my stories with soldiers who come back with trauma is we're inundated with not only Hollywood's fetishes, but Hollywood fetishizes being a child forever, which after a point is the dream factory. What do you expect? But more than anime, more than anything else, modern Hollywood is obsessed with not being an adult, not growing up, but not being an adult. And it's gotten really bad the last 10 years. It was already there in a slow, encroaching manner, but it's gotten much more noticeable since. And that's
Yeah, you're.
yeah,
Sorry,
and
go ahead.
that's where Bass and Ami come in that they are in some ways Theo is still a child. In other ways, he's older than them because he's been around for centuries. So he's seen a lot. He's been in a lot of places, and he's dealt with a lot of things. But he's still, in some ways, a child because he's got that wide-eyed sense of wonder about, especially humans. He's got a wide-eyed sense of wonder about nature in general, but humans in particular, especially his humans, which are all the residents of Naban. And that's the thing. Bass and Ami, they are taking a last-ditch hope and prayer escape from the Savians, but it's an adult escape. It's not cowering in a hole, hoping they'll be missed. It's not running into the mines and getting shot like cattle. It's no, we're going to grab this last best desperate hope and pray it works. Which, if you're up against the wall, that's what you do.
Yeah, you're. And the last thing I guess that, like, as I'm thinking this over, that I would want to make on this whole point that we're on with Lilo and Stitch and them is people will view this, and I think this is where Hollywood falls down because they have this childish point of view. They'll view it in a way that's like depressing. It's like, oh, you need to settle for a life that you don't want, right? Like, that's not, can't we follow our dreams or whatever? And of course, the answer to this is not always, but even more than that, I think it kind of misses something fundamental here, which is that all is covered by love, right? Like,
Mm.
and I mean this in a very specific way. It's like, why isn't Nani's life miserable? Why isn't she, why can you bear it? Why can you bear these things? Well, you bear it because of love, right? Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it out of love for somebody else. She's doing it out of love for her sister. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like the original totally forgets about Nani or doesn't understand the struggle she's going through. The whole one of the major subplots is that is that this guy is interested in her, and Nani can't bring herself to, have a sort of relationship with him, but they do at the end. So it's not like it's not acknowledged at all, right?
Right.
That the struggle is absolutely there. The idea that, like, hey, yes, you can have some form of happiness for yourself. It's okay. That's absolutely in the movie.
Yeah.
It's just that, like, you need to balance these things. Like, you're not going to have your ideal life because that's not how life ever works. Your life can be okay, though. It's like you were saying earlier, like, you can cope, you can have hope, you can make it through the day and even enjoy your day, right?
Yeah. And this is my fellow online writer friend said just recently she's tired of the trope of my life is over. Well, yeah, maybe your dream is over because one of the things she was specifically talking about in a vampire, oh, my life is over, everything sucks. Your dream and your life as you knew it is over. That doesn't mean you can't pick up the pieces and move on from there. What Nani is doing in the original movie is she's picking up the pieces. What Bass and Amy, this wasn't the life they had planned. This was not the life they wanted by any means. They're picking up the pieces and building from there. And it's a very juvenile, puerile idea of everything must fit in this box, everything must be under my control for everything to be perfect, like that teacher in Elegant Yokai Apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And no, that's if you keep doing that, you're going to break. Which another character earlier in the series did do, because he was wronged, but he was he went on a rampage of, because he had erred, because he had been mistreated, he went on the path of wanting to destroy everything, up to and including the hero, who had covered for him and done his best to save his life, including from being possessed. And this guy repaid him by trying to stab him to death. And that's the kind of attitude, after a point, we're dealing with in modern Hollywood is, it didn't go according to my plan, I got mistreated, wah! That's not an adult response.
Yep.
And I can't help you.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be an adult, then I can't help you. And because part of being an adult that the hero in Elegant Yokai Apartments has to learn the hard way is, you can't help people who don't want to be helped. You can't. And if you try, it's just going to drag you down and get everybody, including you, hurt. And that's what we're seeing with Disney after a point, is it's being run by people who want life to fit a bunch of neat checkboxes and to always be perfect and always fit the plan, always fit the script. That's not how life works. It will never be how life works. And you will never be an adult as long as you sit there crying and saying, it's not fair. Well, it's not fair. You can cry a little bit about it, and then you got to pick yourself up, see what the pieces are left, and go and see what you can build out of that.
Yep. So this fits in. My church had a homeless guy hanging around it. Dude was clearly coming off of something, fell asleep in service, blah blah blah, and it's pretty clear that whatever he said, what he was trying to do was get a handout from us, which is a fairly common thing. You'd be shocked how many homeless people will just troll churches, go through them just to get a handout. Now, we don't do that. Our church is not a homeless ministry. We support a lot of missionaries, and we do a lot of stuff for children. But he still doesn't get it. So me and another guy who had more sympathy for him came up and we gave him the gospel. We told him that, hey, Jesus Christ died for you, man. You can get out of this dark place. If you're willing to walk by faith, if you're willing to, seek it. But he's not going to give you these things that you want, that you tell us you want, because all you want is, I want the house, I want a better life, I want a good job, that sort of thing. It's you feel for these people, but they're utterly delusional. So in the end, what was the best we could do for him? Well, the guy who had sympathy for him put him up in a hotel for a night. But quite frankly, the guy did not want to be healed. The guy did not want to be saved. The guy did not want to be, anything. The guy was perfectly fine being a druggie in the middle of St. Louis, falling asleep on church sidewalks. Mm-hmm. There's no saving him unless he realizes his need for salvation. And it's a mindset. Like, when you're obese, you have to realize you're obese to start losing weight. If you look at like my 600 pound life or whatever, these people are in denial. If you look at, people who are sex addicts, dude, you went to Thailand and you stayed there 3 weeks and you came back broke. The cost of living there is pennies a day. What do you think is going on here? Somebody who's addicted to power, or money. It's like, buddy, I saw you, freak out because I forgot my wallet when we went to dinner. I didn't even have, the expensive thing. We've been friends, et cetera, et cetera. Like these things, you can't break people of despair, laziness, until they realize they need it. And it's thinking back on your story, thinking of people who fought in revolutions and stuff like that, some of them, are dysgenic freaks. What we see burn down our cities in the last few years, the stress that you're talking about. Recently with the recent congressional hearings about a certain vaccine and a certain disease that comes from the vaccine, well, that's a whole lot of stress because my brother had the vaccine, he died of myocarditis. What am I supposed to think? I already knew, but it's like now they're openly talking about it. Deep stress. What can you do? Well, I can do things like turn to God. I can not be the victim, but rather, master of my emotions. These emotions that will come no matter what. But instead of submitting to them, I can give them to God. Lord, don't you know that the blood cries out for vengeance for all the horrible things we've experienced for the last 5 years? Whole generations losing a tenth or more of their life to lockdowns to protect the elderly, who in virtuous generations would have gone singing to their deaths or fighting the enemy or any number of things, as we have seen through history. Uh, you know, boomers delenda est, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But with stories like yours, it's always very heartening because it's like I don't need this, victim mentality. I can play the victim all day, but quite frankly, Christ doesn't make us victims. We're not even really victims to sin. Our sin is something we do to ourselves. Original sin, I'm talking about, like lying and gluttony and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
If we want to, if
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, no.
Mm-hmm.
Is for the sequel to the Moon one. For sequels to the Moon one, it's just figuring out how to get there.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, she doesn't have that action pulp feel. I mean, this isn't an action pulp book, so it wouldn't.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but I've had ideas for the Moon mech story for quite a while. It's just figuring out how to get them on the page. So I might try tackling that next. I have some projects that I'm trying to look at for the rest of this year, but I might try and fit in time for the Moon story sequels. Because I had at least 2 in mind, and I'd have to look at the notes again and see what I can make out of those.
And very nice. And Autobot Jedi says the book is about mechs and a cross between Star Wars, Transformers, and the Cold War. What a description. I like it.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Caroline?
Theophany is not just available on ebook and paperback, it is available on Kindle Unlimited. So you can borrow this one as well. And it's my first foray into Kindle Unlimited. So far, I'm impressed. It's there may be others, probably not all of them. And it was really fun to write. I really enjoyed being on with you guys and getting to talk about Theophany because it was a lot of fun to write and it's a lot of fun to talk about.
I'm glad to hear it. And you're a great guest yourself. You can find it on Amazon. Nice little 99 cents. I understand that there's Kindle Unlimited, but real men buy books. As in spend actual money for something that may not be a service that may or may not be deleted on the whim of Bezos, depending on how his hot new Latina squeeze is treating him. Because man, oh man, there's some wild things going on in the world today between the rich and all the strange psyops that they bring forth. Not the least of which, of course, is the psyop to not support right-wing projects for when they try new things. Like our Kickstarter. The link has been in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. next week we will have hopefully, Lord willing, Jojo Fraga to talk about her progress as well as her work in other animatics, especially Epic the Musical. Do look forward to that. Yeah, Sarge Eldritch fan. We start 6 Central. Next week, I will also have a solo stream with Alexander Adams, noted artist, about his book, The Naked Spur, which is probably one of the best examples of artistic ennui ever put down to writing. That wasn't also incredibly gay. It's only kind of gay, but you're okay,
Amazing.
Anthony. You okay? It's it's like one
Amused.
ennui. Barks ennui. Yeah, that covers just about everything. Um, a big Latina is my bane. Yes. Yes, mine too. Actually, no, not really. It's Kiaru. I love those Japanese girls with the blonde hair. Anthony, we have to go to Japan. We have to go to Japan right now.
I am engaged, sir.
Yeah. I didn't mean for you. Uh,
No. What I'm telling you is, I can do it now. We only have a few. No.
right. Anyway, this is about me, Anthony. This is about me.
This is a terrible bit. Let's move on. Sorry, Caroline.
She's gone.
Okay, I see 3 screens, but I realize that's the game. So
I'm
that's
just playing solitaire.
I
I did want to start a new game. But what am I trying to say? Yeah, if you support us, we'll be happy to make more stuff like this. I don't want to make it a sloppy, oh, if we don't do this, we're gonna not do anything. But if this project doesn't take off, it's going to be a clear sign that the market doesn't want it, and I'm going to be trying other new things. Just to see what's going on. I'll also be streaming more regularly this week. I'll be finishing the short story I'm writing for Fantastic Schools Universities, as well as maybe start working on the next Pinkerton's Ghost story and get that started to run again. I don't think we have anything else to talk about. Do we, Anthony?
No.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. It's been a wonderful stream, and you've been wonderful guests. And Caroline Furlong has been a wonderful guest as well. Be sure to support her Kindle, which is in the description below. And thank you.